Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today to our event. I'm Bart Kennedy, the general manager of Stout Textiles. I'm going to introduce Victoria Larson, who's an artist out of Annapolis, who's done several collections with Stout. She's going to present today the Heritage 2 collection, that our latest collection with her. And then we're going to do some screen printing, which I promise you will be very fun. So thank you.
The Heritage 2 collection was inspired close to home. I walk every day. And when you walk, you slow down. And when you slow down, you start to notice things. I started to notice the structure of the flowers and plants that I'd passed by every day for years. Not the showy plants, the roses and the peonies, but the simple plants. The daylilies, coneflowers, and daisies. I started studying how their structure was so interesting, how their spirit was so sort of wild and carefree. The shapes of the leaves, the twist of the petals, and the free-form directions of the stems. And I started sketching. And out of these sketches, the Heritage 2 collection came to life. Florals are a classic for a reason. They appeal to just about everyone. I love having fresh cut flowers in my home, and I wanted to convey that same feeling. Even some of the color palettes came straight from Mother Nature herself, like the cheerful pinks and the subtle mint green. I hope these designs give you the same joy, like a simple walk in the garden or a fresh cut bunch of flowers. I can't wait to see what you do with the Heritage 2 collection.
So as you can see, the collection is floral. It is not meant to be too heavy and serious, though. It's definitely meant to be joyful. You can see the inspiration was where I live, we have a community garden. And it's just kind of the joy of the everyday. And hopefully it's really usable. We brought back a few of the crowd favorites. So you'll see Gentle and Glimmer again, which thank you so much for making them so popular. And then we've brought in a couple of new color palettes. We have a really beautiful pink and a minty green. And honestly, when we first started talking about the minty green, I wasn't so sure about it, but I think it's my favorite color combo. So when you get back to the showroom, you can see all of the fabrics and the new colorways. And then we made sure that those work in with the last two collections. So you can mix and match all of it. The inspiration, as you can see, is just everyday flowers. I brought one of my sketchbooks that has a lot of sketching for this collection in it. It'll be back in the showroom. I encourage you to flip through it. It's not precious. These are, I do them every morning, sitting at my desk or out and about, or I travel with them. And it's really just my way of journaling, of making little details that I might want for later. And just to stay in practice in the morning. So help yourself. So part of the reason these fabrics and wallpapers are special is because they're painted by an artist and they're crafted and printed by artists. And what I want to talk about is how they're made, because to me, makes them really special. So you all are going to come back with us to the showroom and do some screen printing. When you're doing that, imagine this. Imagine a mill with 50-foot long tables, people working in pairs of two, passing a giant paddle back and forth across a screen that's 54 inches wide. They do that down the table every other repeat for every color, and then go back and hit those alternate repeats for every color. And when you see the fabric, they're seamless. So it's really such an age-old craft and skill. People who are doing this are true craftsmen, and they're using the perfect pressure across that paddle, and you can't see where one passes off to another. And you really can't tell where the join is on each of those We design the screens to do that too, by the way. But it's such a beautiful craft. Part of the thing I do like about it, and this is where it's practical for you all, and you can use this as a selling point for your clients. The other thing about screen printing is it really makes the fabric more durable and long lasting. And the reason for that is when you're pressing the ink, squishing it into the fibers, it's not sitting on top. So digital printing is great. It's come a long way. It has its place. But when you print digitally, everything sits on top of the fabric. When you're screen printing, you're pressing it in. So it is a much more durable product. So you can absolutely feel confident about using it on upholstery, using it in any way you want to. And we continue to use the mid-weight ground that everyone seems to like. So it's so versatile, window treatment, upholstery, you name it, it can handle it. So that's part of the reason I love screen printing. Part of it is the history of the craft. Part of it is the durability for you all. And part of it is it just makes such a beautiful product. There are little moments where the screen doesn't quite line up and you get that beautiful wabi-sabi moment. And that shows you that it was done by hand. And that to me is important because that really shows the artistry in the product. So I'm hoping that you all will have some questions for me about screen printing or inspiration or anything about the new collection or the old collections. That is such a great question. I am a lifelong artist. I'm not formally trained. I'm self-taught. I worked in design, interior design, for quite a while. And so I always had a love of textile. Probably like a lot of you, I hoarded textiles at my desk. I started when I had twin girls and my husband travels for a living. So honestly, when the girls came along, I needed to step back from the 70-hour work weeks of a studio. So I found myself at home, but I still needed a creative outlet. And I found that with them, I could do crafts. We did the potato printing. We did it all. And I got back to fine art painting again. It just so happened that I had a friend in town. I had an artist who's a block print artist, and I had a friend who was doing sublimation printing, which is a little different. It's a heat set process. And I played around with doing some of that so I could just make pillows with designs. And then one thing led to another. And it was when digital printing was coming on, which made access to the industry a little bit more palatable for a small brand. And so it really was very organic. I kind of jumped in and I said to my husband, this is what I'm doing. And he said, okay, I don't understand it, but that sounds great. The funny thing is, so my business model was I'm going to print on demand. Everything's going to be digital. And in the end, what I launched, my first collection, was hand screen printed fabrics. Because once I did all the sampling, I did my research, and I found this mill in New England that does this hand screen printing, I couldn't not use them. They do such a beautiful job. It's a better product for what I wanted. And I just fell in love with the process. So I'm so grateful that Stout has continued to work with them. Both mills, the wallpaper and the fabric mills, are in the US. And I'm really proud of that too. I really appreciate them sticking with that. That's important to me. That's a long answer to your question. And actually, just to let you know, the wallpapers are also printed in a really unique way. I wish we had some pictures of the gravure. Of the cylinders for the gravure. So they are also, so the screens, you'll see mini screens today. They've been engraved so that the pattern only goes through where we want it to and makes that design. For gravure, they're giant tubes that are engraved. so that it's a continuous print and the paper rolls through it. And you have to have one for every color. So again, that's a really beautiful process to see that giant cylinder that's engraved with the pattern and elements of the pattern that then layer up and create, you know, something that has multiple colors. So that's been through 3 passes of either screen printing or the gravure process. So if you ever get a chance to go to any of these mills, a lot of them are happy to have you come in, very happy to have you come in and see the process and tell you about it. It gives you such a better understanding of what's going on and what's behind the product. And it's just magical. It's like a kid in a candy store. So, yeah, definitely. For screen printing, the question was, are there certain fabrics that work better or certain substrates? The answer is yes, absolutely. There are a lot of variables that go into it. So today we'll be screening on canvas bags or paper. So the screen that we used works for both of those. And the ink that we're using works for both of those. If we were screening on different materials, we'd have to change both of those things. For interiors fabrics, the process is not only you want a fabric that doesn't have a lot of slub in it, because that's where you'll find the chipping, flaking. If you've ever gotten a solid color or a heavy pattern and you see little bits that are flaking off and you see the white underneath, that's because it's a slubby fabric or it's not a good print. So you don't want that. So you do have to work with fabrics that are treated for and really meant for screen printing. Relatively, I won't say smooth base, but not a big slubby linen unless you want that look. And then the screens themselves, of course, they used to be silk traditionally. They're not really anymore. Some are, but they're fibers, mostly synthetic, and they're woven together to make the screen. And the screens, then you get into a lot of technical stuff, which depending on the level of detail, you want the screen holes to be smaller or bigger in the mesh. And so the screen engraver takes that into account once I send the digital file over. And then the kind of ink that is used on the interiors on this collection, on most interiors fabric, I'm proud to say this is water-based ink, which is much healthier for all of us. And it's always good to know that, you know, it's not going to off-gas and it's not going to kill us. It's nice for an interiors product. The other thing about the fabrics is, you know, you go into a paint store and you ask for a color or a custom color and they push the buttons and they put the formula in and they press the thing. This is all mixed by hand. So we choose the colors. The master who does the paint mixing at the mill hand mixes all of those colors each time and hits that colorway that's our master. So again, it's a craft and it's a really hands-on process.
Hi. Have you learned over time as you became familiar with screen printing and the process that goes into it, have you found that your sketches or your designs have changed knowing the process? What would work, what doesn't work as well?
That's a great question. Yes, absolutely yes. So from a design idea, let's say, okay, I love this cone flower. I'm going to do a pattern that has cone flowers. You do have to know at some point in the process, you have an idea of how you want it to look once you start creating the actual pattern, but you do have to know how you're going to create it. Because if it's digital, you have the latitude of leaving a lot of the original artwork as is. So I usually sketch in watercolor. And if we were to try to replicate that with screen printing, first of all, we'd be way over budget because we'd have to have like 20 screens. And no one could afford the fabric. But it also wouldn't really replicate the watercolor. So that's where digital printing is great. You have to think a little more through it. So for this, to engrave the screen, to be able to print each color, you do have to go through the process of which elements are going to be separated for the different colors. but also you put them more into a vector program instead of a Photoshop program. So they go into Illustrator, which is a vector-based program, which is very much like CAD. So that's how I learned Illustrator, because I knew CAD. So I thought, okay, well, this is familiar. I can do this. It is a different process. So in that way, yes, when you get to actually designing the pattern, you have to think, how many colors can I use? You know, and how can I use them? And then you have to delineate exactly where those are going to go.
When you're thinking about doing your designs, do you think about what fabric it's going on when you start making the design, or is it more just a design and then buying the fabric?
You definitely think about the fabric that it's going on. These are great questions. You definitely think about the fabric that it's going on. And some of it is, you know, some of it is for the Stout collection, we know what the substrates are. And so I know it's a bright white. I know what I'm working with in terms of the weave. There are some designs, though, that just want to be on different fabrics. Some, you know, you look at and you think, this is great, but gosh, it would look so great on a natural ground, you know, and maybe not a bright white ground. Or some just want to be on a big slubby linen, and you want it to be very, you want, you know, the pattern to kind of subtly go in and out of the weave and not be so perfect and be a little more rustic. So yeah, you do have to think about that, definitely.
Print on a very light background, or do you also do some of this on a dark, like a navy, or is it better to do it on a light background?
So anytime you see, you'll see there's a navy stripe and a navy ground. Those two are still the same fabric. It's all the same white base cloth substrate. So anytime you see a dark ground, that's another screen. So that's another color that's been printed. So everything you see that's not white is printed on. You can print, the answer is you can print light on dark. It's typically done more on wallpaper and not on fabric, because for fabric, if you think about it, if a mill is going to stock a dark navy, well, everyone's not going to want that navy. They're going to want a little different navy. So you actually print that color. You have to go through more steps to print light on dark, because you need a kind of like a foundation. You need a layer underneath, and then you can print light on dark, but it's tricky. If you see metallics printed on white or natural, that's only screen printed. You can't do that as well with digital. It's coming, but yeah. And the way to tell, does anyone know the way to tell if a fabric is screen printed or not? I'm sure you do, and you don't realize it. When you come to the showroom, if you flip it over and look at the back, if you can see some of the places where the ink has been pressed through, sure sign, screen printed.
What fading with sunlight? Does it tend to fade the colors, or do they stay pretty true?
I think it's 100 hours light, but I can't remember on this ink. These are pretty, everything will fade. That is the answer. It's the amount of time, it's the placement, you know, is it in a window, and which kind of exposure? It will fade. These will tend to fade less than a lot of digital products, which is nice. Thank you so much for coming.